I'm Catholic, doesn't matter.
Her husband's the city manager, my boss, and a good one, for sure.
He's good.
Sometimes.
And he knows I do my own driveway sealing.
Yeah.
I coach his 3 boys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember when he was a young man.
He's putting you in his place.
Oh, no, he wasn't a young man.
How are you?
Well, I got a man.
I've got some up here because she gave it to me last time. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Hey, Butch, I didn't know I forgot your address. Write your address. You're on there. Yeah, he was here. I saw What's that?
I grew up just big boys. My grandparents lived in Savannah. My other grandmother had 7 lake pond behind her house.
You say it had a
Halfway in, halfway out. Who's coming in? I took a picture. I walked up and tree falling down into the You don't want somebody to be
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. If you're here and you've been here regularly on a city council meeting, you may know that we normally have public hearings prior to our formal meeting, but tonight actually is one of the few meetings where there are no public hearings, so we'll be able to go right into the meeting. However, before we do that, I would like to call on City of Columbia Police Chief Jeremy Alsop, please, for some comments. And as he's making his way forward, many of you in this room know that this past week in the City of Columbia has been a very difficult one for our community as a result of a flyer that was distributed to some of our local churches, traditional African-American churches in the City of Columbia. And last night we had an opportunity to be present for an event. The chief was there, I was there, the vice mayor, other members of council were there to show our support. And it was a very good meeting where we learned a lot. And we talked about the fact that there was an active investigation going, which the chief is going to make a comment on. Before he does that, though, I want to just preface his comments with the fact that once again, the City of Columbia Police Department is showing their true value to the City of Columbia. I say it all the time that our police department really is better than we deserve because they outperform a community of this size, and they are a very sophisticated and skilled department, and we're very grateful to have them in the City of Columbia and their service of what they do in keeping all of us safe. So with that, Chief, I will let you have the floor to provide some updates.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. As of 4:30 this afternoon, a 38-year-old white male and a 17-year-old white male has been taken into custody and charged in this case. We've been cooperating. We've been in cooperation with the district attorney's office, and both of these individuals will be charged under 3917-309 civil rights intimidation, which is a hate factor. As you said last night, or very well, I might add, and just now, there is no place in our community or any community across this country for this kind of behavior. This is not a joke. This is not someone just putting something out for fun, and we will be tirelessly working with the District Attorney's Office to make sure this is pushed through to the fullest extent and held accountable.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Chief. Thank you. All right. With that, we will now move into our regular meeting. We'll begin with a call to order and roll call. We are going to be voting verbally tonight as we continue to experience some issues with our electronic voting system. So tonight we'll be back to the verbal voting. And to begin, we'll ask Mr. Clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Coleman,
Here.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Ms. Hardison,
Here.
Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Wiles,
Here.
Vice Mayor McBroom,
Here.
Mayor Mulder.
Here, let the record reflect all members of council are present. Next, we have the invocation by John Thomas of Southgate Church of Christ. I've seen Mr. Thomas here. Come on up, Mr. Thomas. We're glad to have you. I will ask for all of you to please stand as you are able for this invocation, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Councilmember Debbie Wiles.
Our great God and Father, we come to you tonight thankful for our community. We thank you for this great country in which we live. Father, we give you thanks for our leaders and for this council. I pray that you will bless them tonight as they conduct their business. Pray, Father, that you will bless them and their families. Pray that you'll give them wisdom in all that they do. Father, we thank you for the blessings that you have given to us in our community. We pray that you will continue to shower those upon us. We pray, Father, that you will help us to love one another, that you'll help us to be kind, that you'll help us to be selfless, that you'll help us to bring you glory in what we do. We thank you for all good things, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
You'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. All right, we'll move on now to approval of agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Wiles,
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom, Mayor Mulder.
Aye. The agenda is approved. There being no items under presentations, we'll move on now to Section 6, Organizational Business. Item 6.1, approve the minutes of the June 8th, 2023 City Council regular meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Wiles,
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom, Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 6.2, approve the mayor's reappointment of Shauna Pounders to the Board of Public Utilities for a 4-year term expiring on July 1, 2027.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Wiles,
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom, Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, Section 7, the consent agenda. These items that are deemed non-controversial, not requiring any additional debate. Subject to any member of council requesting a removal from the consent agenda, we will read these collectively and vote on them collectively. Item 7.1, approve disbursements for the month of May 2023 in the amount of $4,424,444.42. Item 7.2, approve and authorize the disposal of surplus equipment. Item 7.3, approve and authorize the mayor to execute the energy equipment installation contract with Path Company LLC in the amount of $824,697 for City Hall HVAC and energy savings upgrades. Item 7.4, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a contract between the City of Columbia and Morris Visitor Publications in the amount of $6,500 for advertising in the 2024 Nashville Wear Guest Book. Item 7.5, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a contract between the City of Columbia and Journal Communications in the amount of $9,950 for advertising in the 2024 Nashville Visitor Guide. Item 7.6, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a work order with Simple View in the amount of $3,500 for the Quick View feature to be added on the Visit Columbia website. Item 7.7, approve the purchase of a 2023 Ford F-550 bucket truck in the amount of $198,018 using Sourcewell contract. Item 7.8, approve the purchase of a flushing trailer and push camera in the amount of $121,458 using Sourcewell contract. Item 7.9, approve sole source purchase of 4 8-phase traffic cabinets in the amount of $74,924 from Temple Inc. Item 7.10, approve the sole source purchase of software license and service plan for computerized traffic controllers in the amount of $99,750 from Temple Inc. Item 711, approve the sole source purchase of Linux CPU boards in the amount of $55,570 from Temple Inc. Item 712, approve the purchase of a snow plow and salt spreader assembly in the amount of $63,773 using Sourcewell contract. Item 713, approve change order 4 to the contract with Sessions Paving Company for the construction of the West 7th Multimodal Streetscape Project, which is adds 61 days to the contract time. Item 714, approve the change order number 5 to the contract with Sessions Paving Company to balance out all remaining item quantities and reduce the total contract amount by $555,599.46. Item 715, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a corrected amendment number 2 to the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation contract for improvements at and around the intersection of Nashville Highway and Bear Creek Pike. Item 716, approve a reimbursement in the amount of $25,000 to Charles Rains and J.D. Etherly for Honey Farm Subdivision Phase 2, Sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Item 717, approve payment in the amount of $57,588 to Local Government Corporation for annual software and maintenance for DataQuest and NextGen software and document management. Item 718, award bid to Waypoint for Arctic Wolf firewall monitoring and support services in the amount of $55,156.65. Item 719, approve an automatic renewal of agreement with Vector Target Solutions for software related to online training and record storage in the amount of $11,146.04. Item 720, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the non-exclusive use and occupancy permit between the City of Columbia and the Columbia Youth Athletic Association for their 2023 football season. 721, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement for engineering services with J.R. Walford on the new Bear Creek Pike sewage pumping station in the amount of $870,000. Item 7.22, approve and authorize the mayor to execute an administrative services agreement with the South Central Tennessee Development District for project administration related to the 2022 CDBG grant and the amount not to exceed $25,000. Item 723, approve the mayor to execute a professional engineering services agreement with Neil Schaefer in the amount of $219,899 for the CDBG sidewalk improvement design. Item 724, approve annual renewal of property insurance with the TML Public Entity Partners in the amount of $197,344. Item 725, approve the annual renewal of workers' compensation insurance with the TML Public Entity Partners in the amount of $135,006. Item 726, approve and authorize the mayor to execute an agreement for grant administration services with the South Central Development District in the amount of $65,000 for project administration related to the State of Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation Water Infrastructure Investment Program. And item 727, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a change order to the contract with Sabre Industries in the amount of $4,837 for the construction of one 190-foot radio tower. You can tell it is the first month of the new fiscal year with that consent agenda, which is a heavy one, but there are a lot of items on that agenda, so thank you for your indulgence on that. That is your consent agenda as presented. We'll entertain a motion.
So move.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, the consent agenda is approved. There being no items under Section 8 Administration, we move on now to Section 9 Resolutions, beginning with 9.1. Resolution number 2344, a resolution to accept the streets and drainage improvements in Honey Farm Subdivision Phase 2, Sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for ownership and maintenance.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Tony Green. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.2, Resolution 2345, a resolution adopting Columbia 2023 through 2028 as the annual strategic plan for the City of Columbia.
So move.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 9.2? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.3, Resolution 2346, a resolution to ratify the authorization of the City of Columbia to apply for the 2024 Arts Build Communities Grant through the Tennessee Arts Commission, accept the one-to-one matching grant award for up to $10,000, and authorize the mayor to execute documents related to accepting and administering the grant project.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye. That item is approved. 9.4, Resolution 2347 to ratify the authorization of the City of Columbia to apply for the Bloomberg Asphalt Art Grant. If awarded, accept the grant award for up to $25,000 and authorize the mayor to execute documents related to accepting and administering the grant project.
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 9.4? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.5, Resolution 2348, tax corrections.
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.6, Resolution 2349, a resolution accepting the donation of one used propane tank donated by Holston Gases and AR Piping to be utilized by the Columbia Fire and Rescue.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom. Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. That completes Section 9. We now move to Section 10, ordinances. Beginning with with item 10.1, second consideration of ordinance 4456, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia, Tennessee, by rezoning a portion of tax map 112, parcel 9, located at 6150 Trotwood Avenue, from rural character district to planned unit development. This is Ward 1. This is the item that also, this topic is items 10.1 through 10.5. We do have a number of individuals who have signed up to speak tonight on 10.1 through 10.5 and or 10.1 and a number within 10.1 and 10.5. So I will call on you as you're listed to speak. Before I do that, Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, it's just announcements for council is that Chief Cobb had previously scheduled a fire chief summit in Orlando, Florida, so that's where he's at this evening.
Okay. All right. So we will begin with the folks who have signed up to speak. Mr. Prevetti, you're first. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Do you allow handouts to yourselves?
You can provide it to the officer that he'll distribute.
Actually, I didn't. I got it. My name is Eric Prevetti. I live at 101 Casey Valley Drive in Columbia, over in Sunnyside. I am a resident of City Ward 4. I am a county commissioner for the 2nd District, and I currently serve as chairman of the county commission. We've all been here and done this and spoke several times on this, and based on items that other persons have said, I just have a couple more things that I wanted to mention. What I've just had handed out to you are the dimensions and specs of the last fire truck that the county just bought. Now, granted, it's not the same as what you have, but basically, this truck is 8 foot across. It's 96 inches. So a road that's only got a 2 foot shoulder on it, it weighs about 80,000 pounds. Water is very heavy, and it doesn't stop on a dime. So basically, you know, the discussion and the issues that I've had with all this have had to do with safety, transportation, and emergency access if there's a problem. You know, the other gentlemen that were here the other night, they spoke about the improvements that they were looking about doing to the roads, and they talked about doing a piece here and a piece there. And that's great. If something happens where they have fixed a bridge or they have widened a piece of the road, that's great. But what about when something happens in the section they haven't done anything to? And I believe that Vice Mayor McBroom alluded to that in his comments, and I appreciate him doing that. Chief Cobb did recommend that 3 lanes be created all the way from Casey Lane to the Mount Pleasant area, and I agree with that. If you should pass this, that I do hope that that's a requirement that gets put in, and that whatever improvements be done, as I said the other night, before anything vertical happens, make sure that the infrastructure is done. I am a voice for the people of District 2 in the county, which includes all of Sunnyside, and everyone that I've talked to is against this. That there's just there's too much traffic. They don't think that this can handle any more of that. The other night, police chief was asked up to comment on what his, you had one engineer say this and the fire chief say that, and y'all asked the question, well, which one do you go with? So you asked the chief to come up. And he mentioned the fact that there had been a number of wrecks. In doing so, what he didn't mention was that how many calls were there to 911? How many calls were there into the neighborhoods just to answer domestic issues or whatever kind of problems were in those neighborhoods? Those officers have to get down that road to do that. If one of those 40 some odd wrecks he talked about is there, then that's going to delay that officer getting to those calls. It did not mention how many ambulance calls were into that area. It also didn't mention how many calls went to the sheriff's department where they've got to exit from where the county, to get out into where they've got to go. And it didn't mention fire calls to any of the neighborhoods. It only mentioned the some odd wrecks. So it's just something that I think, and Councilman Green, you've worked in public safety. You understand that seconds count. Time is of the essence when it comes to the safety of the public. And so I would again encourage that this whole project be voted down tonight. And I believe that's all I have. I do thank you for your time and thank you for your service. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Pavetti. Next up, Gabe Howard.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. My name is Gabe Howard. I live at 1270 Cranford Hollow Road in Columbia, Tennessee. I get the honor of representing the 8th District as a county commissioner. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on an issue that is important to the residents of Columbia and Maury County. Tonight, you're asked to cast your vote on the proposed rezone and annexation of Trotwood Avenue. I urge you to vote against it. First and foremost, our trusted fire chief has sounded the alarm on numerous occasions, identifying this as a public safety issue. I stand before you today with a report that I just passed to the officer, prepared by Mark Gandy, Maury County 911 Director. This report documents a shocking total of 210 accidents on this strip of road alone, 55 with injuries, and 155 within just the last 12 months. I think there's some contradicting data that's been presented to you all, and I would ask you, if this is voted down tonight, this is something that should be part of your planning commission process and the life safety aspect of it. These numbers are not just statistics, they represent real lives that have been and continue to be at risk. They underline the fire chief's concerns and validate his repeated warnings to this body that I have seen firsthand others try to negate. Secondly, the proposed plan threatens to disrupt the rural character that is at the heart of Maury County's identity. The character defines us, differentiates us, and gives us a sense of community and belonging. The density of housing in the proposal is far too great and threatens to obliterate the separation between cities, which is so critical in maintaining what makes our county beautiful and unique. Lastly, I'd like to express my concerns regarding a comment made by Mr. Tony Massey at the end of the study session. He suggested that a no vote would be equivalent to refusing $3.5 million in infrastructure upgrades, thereby insinuating that our city's fiscal health is dependent upon this rezoning. This is a problematic statement that seems to be an attempt to sway the voting body based on monetary incentives rather than the true welfare of our community. Our city's financial standing should not be the leading factor in determining the path we choose. We must remember that public safety, the preservation of our county's character, and the will of our people are at stake. In closing, I'm hopeful that the voice of the people will be heard and respected tonight. I know you all strive to make our community a better place, and I trust that you will make the best decision for the people of Columbia and Maury County. Thank you for your tireless service and dedication. I'm confident you'll make the right decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Howard. Next on the list, we have Campbell Ridley. Mr. Ridley, come on up. Sir, welcome to City Hall. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Campbell Ridley, and my farm is on 6197 Trotwood Avenue, right across from where the proposed development will be. I farm about 500 acres up and down Trotwood for about 2 miles, and the In the spring, we'll have to prepare the fields. We'll have fertilizer spreaders. We'll have planters. We'll have sprayers going up and down this road, and they're not. The maximum they can go is 20 miles an hour. In the fall, when we harvest our crops, my grain bins hold about 60,000 bushels. The semis can transport about 1,000 bushels. So there will be the semis will be in the field, loaded up, go to the grain bins, and then back out. That's 2 trips. They'll do that. It'll be 112, 120 in the spring, loading up the grain bins. When we unload them, to take them to market, be the same thing. So that's 240 trips with a semi up and down the road. Now, we also have combines. We can go up and down there, and they are about 12, the tires are about 12 feet wide. So we're covering from yellow line off the, and into the gravel. These semis, when they're loaded, will weigh about 80,000 pounds. When they take a left, there's a small bridge from East Fork of Greenlet Creek, and the guardrail is about 20 feet from my entrance. To take a left and go toward Mount Pleasant, it's a half mile up top of the hill, and they have to go through several gears, and it's very slow moving. I would like for you just to consider this information when you make a decision of all the traffic hindrance we have on this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley. Next up, Patty Hollingsworth. Ms. Hollingsworth, come on up. Welcome to City Hall. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
My name is Patty Hollingsworth. I represent, and I live at 2105 Alpine Drive. I'm the County Commissioner for District 2. I'm here on behalf of the people that I serve. I've had numerous requests from all the people in my district asking, is there any way that we can stop this development? Also, I've lived here my whole life. I have many older friends who have medical problems who live here, including my mother, who lives on Westwood Drive. She has congestive heart failure. I would love to know that a fire truck, ambulance, or whatever any of my family and friends need, that they could get there to take care of these people. Also, Mr. Ty Cobb plainly said Tuesday that this would not happen without a third lane if this development is completed. I appreciate all you do. I thank y'all for the good jobs that you do, and I appreciate y'all saying no to this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, Connie Green. Commissioner Green, come on up. If you'll identify yourself and give us your address, you'll have the floor for 3 minutes, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to all the city council members that are here. One of the things that I'm concerned about is your strategic plan for growth that's published on the website that I've been reading and trying to study. It says regulations will adequately protect existing neighborhoods from redevelopment pressures, that anything that's not in keeping with the current scale. Now, if you look down Trotwood Avenue, I don't think you find any houses that are 7 feet apart. Can you find one? And this is a very dense development that is coming in. The population growth is from our 2 largest generations that are retiring. The baby boomers and the millennials are preparing for retirement. This puts seniors as a prime people that you need to be catering to and thinking about. Currently, our population is 40% seniors. Now, I understand that these homes that I've been looking at the drawings for are all 2 stories. Seniors do not particularly like climbing steps. So I'm assuming that these developments that we're looking at on Rutherford and the 111 houses behind me, which are all 2-story, are designed for families with children. Now, the situation for that is a problem because a school now costs about $60, $80, $100 million. And with the number of children that you're bringing in through these developments, the only way that the county can build a school, besides finding the property, is to raise your property taxes. We can't build schools without property taxes. We have no other means of making the money for building a school. TDOT does not have any kind of plans that I know of when I've tried to call TDOT about this change. Have you seen TDOT's proposal or their proposal to TDOT telling about this project, telling you that this is what is fine, because they're going to have to come in and maintain this once they leave and go home. So have you thought about what TDOT is expecting? Driveways can only be like 40 feet apart. I can't even get a driveway into my house, and I'm at 6058 Trotwood because there are two driveways that are too close. One of my considerations too is, the 2,000 cars a day to 3,000 cars a day. We can't handle that on Trotwood. We've got a 2-lane road with little or no shoulder. And I think that we need to consider the future for Columbia, the future for Murray County. We do not have a water supply that is going to be able to handle a lot of growth unless you want to go to the Cumberland River and try and find some water.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I gave you a little bit of overage there. Thank you for your presence this evening. Next on the list is Pam Huffman. Welcome to City Hall. If you'll identify yourself, give us your address, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Huffman. I live at 204 Sewanee Circle. I am a county commissioner for the 1st District in Murray County. I am opposed to the new subdivision due to the fact that the schools cannot handle the growth. Our roads are not capable of handling the traffic that will be created with the new families moving in. It will take years for TDOT to implement new plans for widening the highways, not to mention starting construction. Growth in our area of the county affects all people in the county in one way or another. Residents in District 1 are concerned that the rest of the county, or all Murray Countyans, we can not continue to build without plans for roads, schools, water, sewer, fire, and emergency services. I hope each one of you will consider this and vote no against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huffman. Commissioner Huffman. Next up, Bruce Peden. Mr. Peden's here somewhere. There he is. Come on up, Mr. Peden. Welcome to City Hall. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, I'm Bruce Peden, live at 6604 St. John's Way, Columbia, Tennessee. I'm a lawyer, been practicing law in Columbia since 1981. I've been at City Hall numerous times on matters, usually they're controversial for clients. In this occasion, I do not have a client, and other than myself and my dog Speedy. So all I want to reinforce what I've said before on this project. My focus is limited to Yateman Lane. I think that may be eliminated and off the table, but in case it's not, I want to reinforce my opposition to any connection to Yateman Lane. And while I've got maybe another minute or two, I want to just express my gratitude and respect for these county commissioners who take time out of their personal lives and take their responsibilities so serious that they show up at City Hall to speak their opinions. He's not here, but I want to express my gratitude and respect for Chief Ty Cobb, who apparently stepped into some, heat or pressure as a result of speaking his honest opinion about circumstances. I want to express my respect and gratitude to the members of the council, to the mayor and the vice mayor, to the city manager and all the employees at City Hall, including the development staff. They've put a lot of time into this, and I want to express my respect to these developers. They have put a lot of time and a lot of money into this project. All right, and so you all have you have a decision to make. It may be a tough decision, I don't know about that, but I simply ask that you use your best judgment and make the best decision you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peden. Next on the list is Emily Guthrie. Or is that with the applicant? Okay. All right. Next on the list is Randy Butler.
My name is Randy Butler. I'm at 6510 Breckenridge Cove in Ashwood Manor. Appreciate Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council for hearing me tonight. My wife told me when I left, he said, those folks are probably pretty tired of seeing you up there. I think it's about the 4th time I've been standing here. I guess, I don't know if it's anything new. It might be a little different twist, but I struggle with why we're settling for a development out there in rural area of the county that will be the city with cluster homes in Columbia when we don't have to do that. This is a hot area. This is a place that developers are wanting to come to. There's got to be developers out there that want to build a development that is in the same character of what's out there instead of cluster homes. That's north of us. That's happening. I would like to see that not happen in Columbia to keep our charm. So I struggle with why we would consider that, but that's one of the things. I hope you'll vote no tonight. But in the case of not, the through road, I think it's a good solution. What we've discussed in the past about Yetman Lane with the 80% of the property owners having to agree before this road comes in, that's a good solution. The buffer zone, I've built roads in my career for TDOT. I know a lot about building roads. I don't know as much about building subdivisions. What guarantees the buffer zone that they're proposing doesn't get encroached on with a change order or a scope change? I just hope there's some way that you can verify that can't happen, because I don't know if there's controls in place for that or not. The last thing is the road that everybody's talked about, Trotwood, and I'm kind of selfish because I'm thinking about on my little stretch of road they're trying to get out of the subdivision, but people coming in from the north working at Saturn or Nashville are going to come down 43, 4-lane, come down Old Zion and down there and try to turn left on a 2-lane road. It's going to back up to Old Zion, and we're going to be sitting there looking at line of traffic trying to get out. Because there's only there's 2 lanes. You're not going to get around it. I don't know what the right of way on those shoulders are out there that you could widen it maybe another 3 or 4 feet or something that people could maybe get around them when they're waiting there. Or another solution possibly would be the developer gives some more of that land there along the front that they're buying for a 3rd lane through there so that you could put a turn lane in, or at least a middle lane to turn. But that's our big concern there, and that's so many houses is why that's going to happen. So hopefully you'll vote no. I know I'm not covering any new ground, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. And then last individual have signed up to speak other than the applicant on this matter is Mr. Douglas Chapman. Mr. Chapman, welcome. We know who you are, but tell us anyway, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Douglas Chapman. I'm here in my individual capacity. I'm a neighbor who lives over there in Ashwood Manor. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, I appreciate all of y'all and what you do. I'm going to be very brief. I think all this this road has been plowed already. I would just like to ask everybody who's here in opposition to this program to please stand up for me. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that we only had so many people that came up to talk. We had a lot more that were here. I just want to make sure everybody knew how many people we had here tonight that were in opposition to this. Thank you. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. All right. That completes the individuals who had signed up to speak on this topic, other than the applicants, which we'll now go to. And I'll begin with Brandon Baxter. And then we have Jay Easter and Andrew Etheridge. So the floor will be yours for 3 minutes individually.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Good to see you tonight. Thank you for your time. I do want to cover just a few things here briefly in my 3 minutes. The first item I want to cover is something that I neglected to on Tuesday night in the study session, and that is related to the speed limit on Trotwood Avenue. We know that it's 55 miles per hour from near Ridley Park Drive out to the Mount Pleasant city limits. In our conversation, in our meeting with city staff and the fire chief at the end of June, we did discuss the possibility, the potential for lowering that speed limit. I want to just reiterate here in front of you tonight that we are interested and committed in working with the city engineering staff in doing that. I believe that's a request that they would take, they would study, and then bring before you to take action on that item. But we would stand with them and support whatever findings they have, and if there's information we have that we can share with them to help in that, we would want to do that. The second item I want to mention is Tuesday night, we were asked a couple of times if we're listening, if we're hearing what people are saying, and I think we have. Over the past 18 to 24 months, we've heard the project has changed and evolved. It's different than it was when we brought it into, a year and a half to 2 years ago. One of the things we heard specifically Tuesday night was related to the stretch of Trotwood Avenue between our proposed access and the improvements at that, and then our western property boundary that's closer to Yeatman Lane, related to the condition of that shoulder. So here tonight, we're going to say we will scrape the vegetation and stuff off of that shoulder that's caused it to erode a little bit and maybe in poor condition. We'll stabilize that and put it back to where it's a more usable shoulder across our frontage there. And the third item, we've covered this, but want to say it again tonight, the Mount Pleasant traffic signal at Polk Place and Trotwood, committing to do that in our first phase of development. The other item, two other items I want to mention, heard the police chief and the numbers that he gave related to the number of crashes along Trotwood Avenue on Tuesday night. I took that number, went and did just some looking of my own, referring to his number compared to statewide averages that Department of Safety and the TDOT collect around the state. And for a two-lane road like Trotwood Avenue in an urban area with an urban zoned area like Columbia, 2 lanes, speed limit like it is, the crash rate based on the police chief's numbers is lower than the statewide average for that same type of road. I want to say that because I want that to be heard. That is, the crash rate is lower than the statewide average on Trotwood. And then the final item I want to mention is over the past 18 months with the traffic study, we have, working with the city through their process, through their rules, there's been reviews of our traffic study by the third-party consultant and by the subject matter experts in the city staff. We have issued a commitment letter that agrees with their findings, and I believe that this project and the mitigation and transportation improvements they're making with it are sound and appropriate, and we look forward to your consideration, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baxter. Is Mr. Jay Easter? Yes, sir. Mr. Easter, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Council. We are about 2 years into this now. Next week would be officially 24 months since we started this project. I just want to reemphasize a couple items and try to address a couple of the questions that I heard from some of the citizens. One, we are in compliance with the land use plan. We are less dense than is allowed for this. We're at 1.84 units per acre. We're still providing 3 miles of trails. We're still building a trailhead for those trails at Ridley Park and within the neighborhood. We're still dedicating all the parkland we've committed to and have over 45% open space. The question came up about how the buffers would be maintained or be regulated. This controlling document will regulate that. Any construction documents we sent will be compared to this document, and staff will not put us in front of Planning Commission without them being in compliance with this regulating document that comes in front of you. There was also a comment about possibility of a turn lane at the entrance, and wouldn't we add that? We are committed to the traffic study that is going to have the turn lanes at the main entrance during phase 1 and installing the red light in phase 1. So with that, I'm going to let Andrew speak. We have the whole design team here to address your questions, and we look forward to a positive response tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Easter. Mr. Etheridge.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor. I just want to say we appreciate your consideration of our project. We're really excited to be able to bring this project to Columbia, should it go through tonight. We look forward to having it be a positive for not only Ridley Park, but something that Columbia can be appreciative of. And so, again, we're here for any questions. If you need anything, just give us a question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. All right, so we're back on item 10.1. That does cover all the individuals that signed up to speak on this topic. Is there any individual here that signed up to speak that I did not call on this particular topic? I think I covered everyone that did sign up. So with that said, Mr. City Manager, I do have just a couple of questions for the city engineer, please. Mr. Harper.
Mr. Glenn Harper, if you could come forward, please.
Mr. Harper.
Evening, Mayor, members of council.
Thank you for being here. Just a couple questions. One, Commissioner Green made mention of conversations with TDOT, and it just sort of made me think that, generally speaking, you're the direct line of communication with TDOT, at least in official capacity, with the City of Columbia. And I just wondered if you could speak to how that process works in terms of their becoming aware, because these would be improvements that would ultimately be the bulk of them on a state route.
Absolutely. So the way the TDOT process works is the developer will make application to TDOT for the improvements on the right-of-way, the improvements that we require them to do. TDOT looks for our concurrence in those improvements and then will approve whatever measures the developers propose and that we concur with.
So what stage does that conversation begin?
That comes at construction plans.
Okay. And so TDOT relies upon the City of Columbia's concurrence prior to TDOT signing off on it?
Yes, they will not award the permit or the grading permit for the applicant to work in the state right-of-way without our concurrence.
And do they do any individual inspection or review beyond just the concurrence that they rely on from the city?
Yes, they have their own set of requirements that the applicant will submit to them with pavement details, stormwater, and then they do also inspect all of the improvements that are going on in the state right-of-way.
And if some of their requirements were different in whole or in part from what we had sort of been presented with, in order for them to concur, would their requirements have to be met?
Yes, so the state's requirements would have to be met. If any of our requirements are more stringent, they would support ours as well.
Okay. All right. Have you had any conversations with TDOT on this particular project as yet? I know it's early in the process.
We actually have. Someone reached out to TDOT and questioned the project, so the traffic folks sent us a message, and we showed them what was proposed and going on. It's a little early for them to get it, but they looked at the improvements, didn't have really anything to say, but, they did. They thank us for the improvements that we get on the state route.
Okay. All right. Second thing that was also mentioned was the speed limit, the process of potentially reducing that. Would that also involve conversations with TDOT in order for that to go forward?
We would let them know, but you all actually have the discretion over the speed limit within the city limits. So we'd have to do a speed study to warrant the speed reduction. And then we have a speed limit ordinance that you would amend to change that speed limit.
Okay. So that would be to our discretion. However, we'd have to rely upon the information that shows that it's warranted.
We would have to have supporting documentation, yes.
Okay. And then the last question, Mr. Pravetti had provided a printout of what looks to be a county fire apparatus that showed, I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it or not, but just to refresh my recollection, generally speaking, how wide are each lane of how wide is each lane of travel in this area?
So this state route was built like many of the others that we have: Hampshire Pike, Williamsport Pike, Camsell Pike. It's roughly 12-foot lanes and then 2 to 3 foot shoulders. So that gives you an overall pavement width somewhere between 28 and 30 feet.
And then, do you know what the average car width would be? Is that some type of
so
industry?
when we look at cars, a standard car is probably 6 foot, a truck or SUV 7, but we can go by like a parallel parking space is 8 foot wide.
Okay, so we're talking about 30 foot of lane between the two lanes and then the shoulders.
That's right, yes.
And then we're talking about what would be collectively 16 feet if they were both parallel parking lane widths.
Correct.
So basically you have the difference between 30 and 16 in terms of additional footage for purposes of emergency apparatuses or otherwise.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the city engineer? All right, we're back on 10.1. Any questions from any member of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Coleman.
I do have a question for Mr. Keltner.
Paul, if you could come forward, please. Paul Keltner.
And I apologize if these also may have been asked of Mr. Harper, but I wanted to see you walk up here too.
Sure, thank you.
So can you kind of put this in layman's terms what traffic studies are and what we use them for?
So a traffic impact study is something that's required at a planned unit development. It's required at the very beginning. We also have thresholds for commercial developments when they trigger certain generation of trips, as well as the number of households being 75 or more. It's an automatic for that. The purpose of a traffic impact study is to look at the level of service that's currently there today. We'll collect that data. We do it at the time. We don't use old data. We do it at the time of the request. Then you also model out what the impact of what the development that's being proposed when it's completely built out, and then you also compare that level of service. So the whole goal of a traffic impact study is to maintain the current level of service, or if there's a way to improve that, we'll also be looking for that as well. Those traffic improvement studies will highlight out what we can expect when the project is completely built out, and then what improvements should be going along with it to make sure to maintain that level of service throughout the development.
So this development being about a 10-year long development, it looks like my understanding from the documents they provided. So it take them 10 years from start to finish. Does the traffic study, so you're saying that it would, if they follow all the requirements of the traffic study, it would essentially, if they fulfill those requirements, it would essentially mean that Trotwood shouldn't, in theory, look or operate differently in 10 years?
As far as level of service, yes, sir. So level of service has different, as it states, different levels. That's basically upon the time that it takes you to maneuver through that space, which is done by time. And so the goal is to keep your time the same or better than what it is today.
So these traffic improvements that they're making are going to maintain, as Trotwood is right now, as we move through it now, it should be maintaining that.
Far as the level of service, yes, sir.
Okay. And then are they doing anything above and beyond what the traffic study requires, or just requirements only?
I believe, well, that's getting a little bit more into Glenn's world, but I believe there were a couple of things that maybe we asked for additionally. That's right, taking the curve. I thought there was something, so the curve on the Ridley Drive. So as now when you go into Ridley Drive, it's got a very sharp curve there because we did not have access to the property that they are looking at purchasing. And we're unable to obtain those easements to do that. But in this one, they're also reducing the geometry in that to make it a little bit more of a safe curve going into the park there, which the traffic study did not pick up on.
Okay. Is that the only one?
Out of the traffic improvements, they are installing all the improvements that were identified and warranted through the study. Through the PUD process, though, you all did have them accelerate some of the improvements and put them in a little earlier. Mm-hmm. And then I guess we heard tonight they're going to reestablish the shoulder, which is a traffic activity.
So the shoulder is something that they're doing above and beyond the traffic studies requirements?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Also the timing.
And I'm sorry, the time?
And the timing, yes, sir. So typically the light and the turn lanes would come at a later date in the phasing there, but they're agreeable to do that early.
Okay. Great. I think that's all I had for you. Anybody else?
One more, Vice Mayor, if I can, real quick, just with Mr. Keltner. Okay. Mr. Keltner, on the traffic study, was there anything that, I mean, generally speaking, the developer is required to make improvements to the roadway for issues that the traffic study identifies that the development is going to create? In other words, if there needs to be a turn lane for whatever reason because of the development, then they have to do a turn lane. But were there anything that were contained within the traffic study that's already basically warranted without the development even being in place now? I mean, for example, I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. It seems like that the light in Mount Pleasant is something that has been needed for a long time, or at least is needed now. Is there anything else along those lines?
I'm aware of that. Just that light at
the light at Polk
was already warranted, yes, sir.
Okay. And then one more thing, last thing for you, Mr. Keltner. Can you refresh our recollection on where we are procedurally? I mean, it's the second consideration, obviously, of this, but I mean, how did it get to second consideration? Did that motion, I guess I'm trying to figure out about Yateman Lane. How are we seeing second consideration tonight for purposes of knowing how we might need to make a motion?
So your consideration right now, you would need to, any consideration would need to include some of the things that have been discussed. We would need to include your timing for your traffic improvements. It did come before this body with a recommendation to not connect to Yeatman Lane. So unless you change that recommendation, that's how it would be moving forward. But outside of that, just any extra things as far as regard to timing that would be outside of the documents is what you would word for.
So it came from Planning Commission with the recommendation for there not to be a connector.
That is correct.
Okay. Which was contrary to the staff's request, but it's how it passed out of Planning Commission.
That is correct. Yes,
okay.
Sir.
All right. Any other questions from Mr.
That will
Kiltner?
be on 10.5 when we get to.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. But it did fit within the conversation, so
Yes,
I asked
sir.
it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All
It
right.
applied 10.5. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Marshall?
Yes, we talked about it Tuesday, but the improvements of the road will only be on the north side of the road. Nothing will happen on the south side. Is that correct? Y'all can only improve the westbound.
So along the property frontage where our main access is, from near Ridley Park to, to the other property, we will improve all to the north. You'll still get 3 full lanes. We'll widen 1 full lane to the north. At the Zion extension and at Old Zion Road, where there is also some widening in the later phases, we don't have frontage that we can use. So in that case, we will look at what right-of-way TDOT has available, and we will use the best design we can to fit within what TDOT has available. And then once we're outside of that, we will go whichever way we need to if there's not room in the TDOT right-of-way. But along our frontage, we will widen all the way to north, and there's a right-of-way dedication that we're providing as part of the PUD that will also be there that will be widening into. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Councilmember Hardison.
Oh, yes. Can we have Mr. Donnie to come up, please?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Boshiers. I'm sorry.
Donnie, if you come forward, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I just wanted to ask, in your expertise, can you kind of give us a rundown on the water supply infrastructure for this potential development?
Well, not the water, but I can the sewer.
Yes, sewer. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. That basin will go to our Green Lick Pump Station, which is located off of Williamsport Pike. The Green Lick Pump Station was upgraded not exactly 12, 14 years ago, I think, with plenty of capacity to handle that area. I do believe that they're thinking about 1 pump station. Isn't that right, Mr. Etheridge? There'll be 1 additional pump station, that they will build that if we would take over as a city. But there's plenty of capacity out there and areas for them to connect to our existing system.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Boshiers. And since she asked regarding the water availability letter, we have that process has been cleared, right, Mr. Keltner? Seeing a nodding of the head. Okay. Any other questions for any member of council? Vice Mayor.
One thing that we have to will remember is they still have to do a preliminary plat, and all those questions that you had will be answered by our staff. So Mr. Boshiers will have to sign off on the pump station. If he doesn't like it, they have to do what he likes. And the water, they'll give a water availability letter. Still, they have to sign off on the preliminary plat, and Mr. Harper has to sign off on it, and the city will sign off. So all these, they still have a lot of work to do. This is just the start part of it. So all your questions hopefully will be answered then.
All right, we're back on 10.1. Anyone have any further comments, questions, or want to make a motion on second consideration?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Coleman.
I have something kind of, this is in general, and this is something I hope we can do more of just discussion amongst us as a council, because all of us, including the county commissioners, we're all a little bit nervous about the sunshine law and about how much we talk to each other. But obviously that means that we're doing a certain amount of our research in silos. And one thing that I come back to when I'm thinking about developments like these, especially larger ones like this, and Mr. Massey's comment about the $3.5 million infrastructure, that is an important question, or an important thing to consider, because we're also supposed to be looking out for tax dollars. The money for infrastructure comes from one of two sources. It's either going to be the private entities, right, or tax dollars. As was mentioned, we have to raise taxes. We don't get it from a private entity. And so in instances like this, getting money for infrastructure very much is, I think, and should be part of the conversation. Obviously, it should not be valued over human life, safety, but it is part of the conversation. Because if we aren't getting that money from private entities who want something we have because it's in demand by the general public, then that means it has to come from taxpayers. And even if we said no to this development, and I haven't made my mind up either, because this is a conversation I think is important that we have. Come to these with open minds, being willing to change our minds and hear the facts. And I think that it's just something to consider is that the infrastructure, does it come from the public, or do we use opportunities to get it from private entities? I know there was a time where this development was offering, I think it was around $5,000 per home built to go towards the school system, which, I think that's us. I think that's both parties, both private and public, getting creative to solve the problems that are here. So I don't know, those are just some things I think I wanted to bring up. Is if we do turn this down, lots of times deals don't get better later on down the road. And I'm not saying again that we take this, say yes to this development just for the $3.5 million. That's not at all what I'm saying. Let me be clear about that. But I do think that it's an important factor, because again, we're also in charge of spending the tax dollars wisely. And so again, if we're not getting it from private entities, then we are going to eventually have to take it from local citizens. So those are just some thoughts that I wanted to make sure I shared.
Thank you, Councilman Coleman.
Any other member of council wish to be heard or make a motion? I'll say just a couple things on this topic. First of all, I do appreciate the input that we've had from our elected officials and also from the residents that have been here. Short of another deferral, which I don't anticipate, this may be the last time I see some of you folks coming to our meetings that have been here for a while, and I'm sort of sad about that. But please do know that you're welcome here anytime. And even if the decision tonight doesn't go the way you want it to go, even if we may disagree on the issue and the outcome, hopefully you leave here with some degree of understanding, if not respect, for the process that's been unfolding on this particular development. We throw around the term a lot, and we talk a lot about smart growth and what does that look like. Nobody really knows the definition of smart growth, because everybody has their own opinion on what growth should look like. There's some people that don't want to see any growth. There's some people that don't think that maybe we're growing enough. Some people that don't think we're growing the right way. Some people that think we're growing just right. And so if you ask each one of those individuals what smart growth looks like, they're all going to have a different answer. So I don't know the answer to smart growth, but I do know that this process has made the city of Columbia a better place, because we have had some lessons learned in this. To the comment regarding Chief Cobb being in hot water, I don't know where you heard that, but that's not true. What that process revealed is that there was a little bit of a disconnect between communications between departments, because as you know, that issue came up at the point in time on a second consideration, meaning that this had already been passed on first consideration. It had passed out of Planning Commission. And so what we learned there is that if there are issues such as that, those need to be communicated or identified, whether it be our bringing them out or someone else, prior to second consideration. So that's, I wanted to clarify the hot water issue. In fact, that issue has made us a stronger city, because we can now improve and better our processes and procedures. Regarding these numbers that have been thrown out regarding traffic count. That is one of the main reasons you don't start letting those numbers get involved in this conversation, because those numbers are so easily manipulated. I've seen the public records request that was filed by the County Commissioner Howard, and I'm already seeing some of the reports that have been provided to them, and they're all over the board because of the fact you can manipulate those numbers how you want. Sure, in some of the reports, there's a showing of that includes a fender benders in the Food Line parking lot. Well, I don't think that anybody, including any of the county commissioners, would want that to be included in a traffic count that's being used to support or speak up against the traffic needs on Nashville Highway, or Trotwood, I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, we've heard from our city engineer on the roadway conditions and the roadway improvements. We've heard his comfort level regarding the width of the roads and the abilities of vehicles to travel, and in fact, leaving behind significant feet of abilities for fire apparatus. Also in this project, the city of Mount Pleasant is getting something that is past due for them, and the developer is willing to pay for it. And as the mayor of Mount Pleasant pointed out to me, Mount Pleasant also has mutual aid with the city of Columbia. So to the extent, unlikely as it may be, there was an issue with purposes of Trotwood Road access, the city of Mount Pleasant would be at the ready to assist, just like the city of Columbia is at the ready to assist the city of Mount Pleasant. So with that said, for purposes of making a motion and just to get the vote either way, I will make a motion to approve on second consideration. And just to make sure I'm clear, Mr. Tischer, with regards to any contingencies on the motion, should they be made at 10.5 as opposed to 10.1? Because this is just the zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
10.5 is if you approve the 10.1, 2, 3, and 4. 10.5 is when you will need to address the traffic study and Yeatman Lane.
Okay. Well, prior to taking my mic off on the motion, let me just point out that one other issue that has continued to rear its head is on the Yeatman Lane connection. And if you recall, I've been a little bit all over the board on that issue. I do apologize, but it's because I've evolved on it, just like Councilmember Coleman mentioned. I mean, this is not easy. Hopefully, you've also taken away some appreciation for that. But on the Yeatman Lane issue, I do believe at this point, based upon the request of the residents, primarily which are Ashwood Manor, which are primarily county residents, that when we make decisions, we look to the future, and we also want to consider the present. What I know is that the future of this development, if it's approved, is going to mean that there's going to be a nice neighborhood of nice new homes, some of the nicer homes in Columbia, in the city of Columbia, Tennessee. What I know is that there are going to be plenty of people and families that are going to want to move in those homes. We've had an opportunity just this week to visit with Merson at their factory and their new newly constituted plant out there that's going to employ over 100 people. We know about the jobs that have been coming, and we're charging our city our chamber and economic development team with bringing jobs here. And we're giving them that obligation. And so when they do that, when jobs come here, there has to be a place for folks. Many of those jobs will go to current folks, but we also want to facilitate some growth along with it as well. So I do just want to say, though, on the Yeatman Lane, that is something that I've heard from the Ashwood Manor folks, and I do believe that I would fully support not allowing the connectivity between Yeatman Lane and this development. So that's something that I did want to make clear before I yield the floor. So that'll be my motion on item 10.1.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
No.
Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 10.1 is approved. Next item, 10.2, second consideration of ordinance 4457, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the zoning ordinance of the city of Columbia to zone property being annexed by resolution 2329 located at 61 Trotwood Avenue, being a portion of tax map 112 parcel 9 to plan unit development. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on 10.2? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
No.
Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.3, second consideration of ordinance 4458, an ordinance to amend 4400 ordinance, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia, to zone properties being annexed by Resolution 2329, located at Tax Map 112, parcels 2.03 and 10.01, off Trotwood Avenue and Old Zion Road to Plain Unit Development Residential. I'll make the motion to approve item 10.3.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
No.
Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.4, second consideration ordinance 4460, an ordinance to amend 4400, the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia to zone property being annexed by Resolution 2329, located off Old Zion, being a portion of Tax Map 112, parcel 10.07 to Plain Unit Development Residential. I'll make the motion to approve item 10.4.
Second.
It's been moved and approved. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
No.
Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.5, second consideration 4461, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by approving Old Zion Road PUD preliminary master plan located off Trotwood Avenue, Tax Map 112, parcels 2.03, 9, 10.01, and 10.07. And this is the item that requires the motion on the relative to the PUD. Mr.
Relative to the traffic study improvements and the red light and Yateman Lake.
All right. Vice Mayor, would you like to?
I would suggest, I mean, I don't know if we've done it before, but I would suggest either Mr. Keltner or Mr. Harper to come up and tell us what they remember that's supposed to be done so we don't leave something out. Is that proper?
That's fine.
Sure. Gentlemen, if you could both come back up to the podium, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to try to recap that for you there to kind of refresh it and bring it all together for you here a little bit. So with the regards to the connection to Yeatman Lane, it did come before from Planning Commission with it not being recommended. So I don't see any need to change that based on what I'm hearing there unless you want to do such.
So
it would move forward without the connection.
Remove the easement.
Yes, sir.
No connection to Yateman.
No connection.
If you want to, yes, sir. The other thing was with regard to the phasing of the traffic lights. So you, if I understand correctly, you want the turn lanes and the traffic signal for Chapman's Way, which is the main entrance into the subdivision, to be done in phase one. We would recommend that be done prior to the first CO of that development there. So in other words, before the first home can be finalized, they would have to have that infrastructure put in place.
And when you include that, the traffic light, you're including the turn lanes, all that's.
Yes, sir, would have to, for the light to function correctly, yes, sir, would have to have turn lanes and the light installed and working.
Well, right there, would you go ahead, they said they have agreed now to go ahead and clean up the rest of the shoulder.
Yes, sir, to redress the shoulders, yes, sir. So to redress the shoulders in front of their property. As well as the installation of the signal there at Zion Road and Polk Lane. All of that being in phase one.
Did you say free lights?
No.
Okay.
All other traffic improvements to go along with the scheduled appropriate time.
And a traffic study performed every 12 months, is that correct?
That's a part of the traffic study, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Of the items you mentioned, Mr. Keltner, go back to the shoulder because I think that was a recent development, maybe
Yes,
as
sir, it
recent
was.
as today. Can you say that out loud one more time, please?
So they're agreeable to basically they're touching everything but a small section in the middle. There is a large portion of that's in front of their property. So they're agreeable to going and redressing the shoulder, which means reestablishing the gravel shoulder that's there, stabilizing anything that needs to be done for that.
That's not otherwise now showing on their current plan.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that is in front of property that they own now currently.
That is correct, yes, sir. So that would really only leave a very small portion there in front of Ashwood Manor that would not be redressed.
Okay. So I'll try this, but please stay before you leave just to make sure. So I'll make a motion to approve item 10.5 on the condition that there is no connection provided to Yateman Lane, that the turn lane and signalization at Chapman's Way for the Ridley Park entrance be installed prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy for any structure in the development. Also required would be which is not currently in their plan, but now would be the redressing with installation of gravel and other shoulder improvements at the section of the property which they own, but currently shows no improvements as it is now. And then the fourth item being the signalization at Polk Lane, also being required to be performed during phase one, or should that also be tied to the CO?
Yes, sir.
Also, the signalization at Polk Lane also be required to be installed prior to the issuance of the first CO of any structure in the development, and then also subject to the fact that any and all other requirements as outlined in the traffic impact study be implemented and instituted as outlined in the study, including but not limiting to a new study performed every 12 months during the course of this development.
Yes, sir. And just for the record, the name of the road is Champions Way. I think I said that incorrectly. Champions Way.
Champions Way.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So that is the motion. Is that a proper motion, Mr. City Attorney? He's saying that it is. That's the motion. Properly seconded by Councilmember Hardison. Any discussion on item 10.5? Hearing none. Mr. Green, Councilmember Green.
Clarification once again. This is just on improvements.
On traffic improvements.
Good. Okay.
This is the improvements and the agreeing not to have the connection on Yateman Lane.
Thank you.
And Mayor,
Councilmember Wiles.
I'll go back to Tuesday night to the diagram that had the widening at the 3 points in the 3 different colors. We're still only going to widen that one spot, and then the second and third will occur as developments happen. Okay, thank you.
As it was outlined on the phasing.
Thank you.
As the updated traffic
As the
studies
updated
warrant.
traffic
Yes, ma'am.
study. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's what I was listening.
Councilmember Coleman.
I just wanted, on that note, I'm glad Councilmember Wiles brought that up, is that's oftentimes how anything gets improved is piecemeal like this, where someone buys it and we only get some of what we want. We don't get all of what we want, but it does set a precedent. So that's just to kind of touch on that, because I thought that was important to note. How do we get in infrastructure over time? And piecemeal like this is normal. So anyways, that's all I got.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski, take the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 10.5 is approved. All right. Moving on now to 10.6, second consideration of Ordinance 4469, an ordinance to amend the Columbia Municipal Code by repealing and deleting Title 12, Chapter 1, Section 12102 pertaining to the building code and adopting new Section 12102.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. I should say, by the way, if you'd like to leave, please feel free. We will continue with the meeting, but thank you all for being here. Item 10.6 has been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on that item? Please do keep it down, please. 10.6, no further discussion. Mr. Jablonski, please take the vote.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green? Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall? Mrs. Wiles? Vice Mayor McBroom? Mayor Mulder?
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.7. Second consideration of Ordinance 4470 to amend the City of Columbia Purchasing Manual as adopted by Ordinance Number 4209, adding a new Section 3.15 on construction management services and changing the bid amount from $25,000 to $50,000 and the purchase order amount from $4,000 to $8,000 at all places where it is referenced in the purchasing manual. That's item been moved and properly seconded. That item. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green? Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall? Mrs. Wiles? Vice Mayor McBroom? Mayor Mulder?
Aye, that item is approved. Next item is 10.8, first consideration of Ordinance 4471, an ordinance to amend Ordinance 4400, the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by rezoning tax map 41, parcel 15, located at Freehand Lane and Cleburne Road, from Neighborhood Character District to General Urban Character District, and establish the date of August 10, 2023 as the date of public hearing. It's Ward 5, item 10.8, and I do have an individual who signed up to speak on this item, Mr. Nelson Crow.
If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crow, for being here. So that is item 10.8.
Yes, I'm curious what is going there.
Mr. Crow, could
Mr.
you
Crow.
come forward?
Well, what we're trying to, thank you, Council. My name's Nelson Crow, and I'm one of the owners of the property. This is to correct a mislabeling when the new code came in, zoning code. It was, I believe, it was zoned neighborhood commercial, and they mislabeled it CD3. We have no plans at this time for anything. We're just trying to correct the mistake. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions on that? On item 10.8? Okay, we're back on 10.8. Mr. Tischer?
And let me say one thing on a zoning request. We can't particularly ask what particular project is going in. On a category, you can ask what the category includes, but anything within that category can go in there. And if we get our mind focused on one particular project, you could be refusing a zoning category based on one project that you may not like, and that could be a situation to where we could be challengeable. So you need to, the appropriate question would be, what does that category allow to go in there?
All right. Thank you for the clarification. Maybe get a little CLE credit for that, Mr. Tischer. So the motion's been made by Councilmember Coleman, properly seconded by Councilmember Green. Any further discussion on item 10.8? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman? Aye. Mr. Green? Aye. Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall? Aye. Mrs. Wiles? Aye. Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 10.8 is approved. Next, item 10.9. First consideration, ordinance 4472, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by rezoning tax map 90, parcel 7.08, located off River Road from planned unit development mixed use to urban center character district, and established August 10, 2023 as the date of public hearing. This is Ward 3. Vice Mayor McBroom.
Oh, I'll have to abstain on this one.
All right, let the record reflect the Vice Mayor is abstaining on item 10.9. It's now open for discussion, and we did have one individual sign up to speak tonight, and that is Greg Gamble with the applicant. So, Mr. Gamble, come on up, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Greg Gamble, and I'm here representing the applicant tonight. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I was here. If y'all had any questions, we're happy to answer those tonight. Also wanted to point out that following the Planning Commission, we did host a neighborhood meeting. It was well attended, and we had a lot of very good input from the neighbors on architectural character, quality, and the relationship of what we're proposing to theirs. Their number one concern was large-scale commercial with large parking lots being developed in that property, and we assured them that is not what we're doing. So, thank you.
All right. Did you have something, Councilman Marshall, or no? Okay. 10.9, back on it. First consideration. It's been moved by Councilmember Green, properly seconded by Councilmember Marshall. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman? Aye. Mr. Green? Aye. Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor McBroom?
Abstain.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. That item is approved. Final item, 11.1, Resolution 2329, a resolution to annex and approve a plan of services for properties and portions of properties at tax map 112, parcels 2.039, 10.01, and 10.07, located off Trotwood Avenue into the city of Columbia, Tennessee. This is the annexation resolution that we wait until the conclusion of the prior ordinances prior to voting on. So that is the resolution number. I will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski.
Mr. Coleman? Aye. Mr. Green? No. Ms. Hardison?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Wiles? Aye. Vice Mayor McBroom?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. That item is approved. All right. There's no need to go in executive session, Mr. City Attorney, to my knowledge. So hearing none, does any member of council wish to be heard? All right. Hearing none, then I just want to close to once again thank the staff particularly the development services, and particularly the city engineer as well, for their good work over the last year, almost years, plural, on this project. That was the topic of conversation tonight. Just as I said regarding the city police department, when we have opportunities to work with staff on these complex type of developments, I'm reminded of how fortunate we are to have such a professional and sophisticated department of development services. And so, gentlemen, please accept our sincere thanks and send that to staff as well. And I'm just overall proud of our city staff as a whole. Some of the departments don't get as much airtime in these meetings as others. I haven't seen Mac Reagan at the podium in a couple meetings, speaking of which, but he is here. I know Juan is here. We've got them all here. But I want to say thanks to all of the departments who are represented tonight for their continued good work. Just, please express that down the line to everyone, that they have the appreciation of everyone on this council.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to make the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Mr. Jablonski, please take the vote.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green? Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall? Mrs. Wiles? Vice Mayor McBroom? Mayor Mulder?
Aye, we are adjourned.